Hello, all. Good evening. How are we all doing? Hi, Yasmin. How are you?
Hi, Irene. Hi.
Hi, you good?
Yes, yes. You?
Yes, I'm good. Hope the rest are also doing amazing. If you're doing amazing, you can just give us a thumbs up or something. At least we should know that you're here and you're doing good. Thank you. I have seen some of us who are doing fine. Thank you for that and welcome to today's session. 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. As we all know, our theme for today is localizing justice. So this is going to revolve around ways of which we can strengthen capacities for gender responsive legal systems and accountability for women and girls in Kenya. So I will let Yasmin introduce what you're going to discuss before I can continue from there. We are like 16 people. I think we should just start because we are way past time. The rest will just join us along the way.
Good evening, distinguished panelists, colleagues, and friends. My name is Yasmin Darmi. I am the national lead for the Kenyan chapter of the Young World Federalists and a Foreign Service Officer at the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs. Kenya has made strong legal commitments to protect women and girls through frameworks like the Sexual Offences Act and the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. These are all in the Constitution if you want to look it up. Yet today, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Only 10% of women can access formal justice systems, and tragically, femicide remains at crisis levels. We all watch the news, we are familiar with what's going on countrywide. The challenge is not the absence of law, it is the absence of access, implementation, and accountability. Today, we are all here to bridge this gap. This webinar, aligned with the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, is about taking global commitments and making them real in Kenya. We are going to nationalize everything and we are going to change the frameworks and the mindsets. We will focus on inclusive, action-oriented solution and ensuring that women, regardless of where they live, their identity or circumstances, can claim their rights. Together, we will all draft a roadmap that strengthens legal access, removes barriers, and demands accountability from all levels of government. I encourage, I want all of us to bring your expertise, to bring your lived experience and your commitment to justice to the table. Let's turn policy and global commitments into real change for Kenyan women and girls. Thank you, and I look forward to a productive discussion. Thank you, Irene.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for that introduction. We really needed it to just remind ourselves that we should be here and that we should be able to at least bring our expertise and figure out how we can make things work, especially for girls and women in the space. So we will be having our panel discussion, and I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Jahira Gitahi, who is uh, who is literally a discussant and interdisciplinary thinker who creates material that discusses, amongst other things. So the various and mundane in which ways in which colonialism has affected the African continent. So as a researcher and scholar, they align themselves with queer, feminist, African, and decolonized texts and authors, analyzing them for their value to the culture and unearthing histories that have been temporarily forgotten. So outside of their cultural work, she's an international lawyer working as a decolonial feminist researcher, teacher, and writer. She is here and she has a lot of expertise she's going to bring here in the discussion. She's going to tell us all her experience around working for all the years she has been working. We also have Kadil Gadoni, who is the founder of Farm Maria organization. Hope I've pronounced it right. And she is somebody who has also worked in the same sector and also a very good advocate for gender justice and a researcher and the founder, as I have said, of Famaria organization. Her work focuses on advancing gender responsive legal systems and strengthening accountability for the rights of women and girls. So with her experience in research, youth engagement and policy advocacy, she champions evidence-based approaches that center community voices and lived realities. So Cadil empowers young people to engage in governance processes and contribute to transformative, inclusive, and equitable development. And finally, I will let them introduce themselves. We have Michelle Perez Tendet Mudibo, who is a Kenyan anthropologist. So she champions for climate justice, and she's also a founder and executive director of the Attended Foundation. So she is a graduate of the University of Nairobi and currently serves as an intern in multilateral affairs at the Embassy of Costa Rica in Kenya. So her work focuses on advancing indigenous knowledge, youth leadership, and culturally grounded approaches to justice and climate resilience. So I hope they are all available. So let's have them introduce themselves before we get to the panel discussion. Please, Jahira, are you around? You say hi to the audience before we continue.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a productive conversation. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here and thank you for just being willing to share your experience and expertise. Also, Kadil Gadoni, hi, how are you? Are you available? Say hi to the audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Aditi Katoni. I am the founder of the Maria organization, a researcher and also an advocate, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, and you're welcome. Thank you for being here. And finally, Paris Mudibo.
Hi everyone. My
Hi.
name is Michelle Paris Modibo Tendat. Thank you for having me here. I look forward to an incredibly engaging conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So we'll just get straight to it. And my first question will go to Jahira. As a leader at Feminists in Kenya, you're doing really well also there. We were able to see that you are the lead Feminists in Kenya program lead. Sorry, you're the program lead, which is quite amazing because at least you are there at the forefront and you see some of these things that are happening. Um, you have a unique perspective on the tension between traditional justice and constitutional rights. So, how can Kenya effectively reform alternative justice systems so they can act as vehicles for gender justice rather than spaces that entrench patriarchal norms? And also, what specific feminist checks and balances should be integrated into these informal systems? I know it's a long question.
Yeah. No, that's all right. So at Feminists in Kenya, we are a revolutionary and decolonial feminist collective. So what we do prioritize is, rather than seeking access to justice through the courts or the police or any other carceral systems that may end up doing more harm than good, we do prioritize transformative justice. And what transformative justice is basically an anti-carceral approach where and this goes to your question about like what feminist values and
Yeah.
protections do we have? It's a survivor-centered approach because when you speak to survivors, you learn very quickly that the criminal justice system, as it is called, is quite traumatizing, takes a long time, and rarely it does not guarantee justice, right? You're going through the process hoping for the best, and then after a very traumatizing period of time, you don't get, the ruling that you want. Or even when a perpetrator is locked up, say you have a scenario where a husband beats a wife and police intervene and he's arrested and he is locked up. And perhaps this husband was the breadwinner of the family, and maybe all the wife wanted was for him to apologize and do better. But now you've lost your primary breadwinner. So the criminal justice system can end up putting you in a position that is worse than what you were initially in when you were facing violence. And then also we realized that prison is not this space of rehabilitation that we speak of it as being. And if you really probe the minds of people who want perpetrators to be locked up, we don't exactly want for people to be locked up so that they can rehabilitate and become better people and come out into society. We want them to be locked up and we throw away the key. When someone is particularly egregious in their crimes, we young people say, throw them under the jail. Like, I don't even want this person to be in the jail. I want them to be buried under the jail. We never want to see them ever again. So feminists in Kenya, analyzing all these issues, prefers to have a survivor-centered approach where you ask the survivor, what is it that you are looking for? Like, what do you seek from this process? After facing this harm, what outcomes are you looking for? Are you really looking for this person to be locked up? Or are you looking for maybe monetary compensation or a public apology? Or they go to rehab or they see a therapist for a mandated period of time? What are you looking for? So the problem with having this model is, as you have mentioned, Irene, it's very easy to exploit it, right? Communities, when we approach communities and you tell them that they should deal with things in the community level, what tends to happen is a 15-year-old girl is raped by a 50-year-old man, and the community's response is tunaweza elewana, like wacha watu wakubwa waongee, later 500 to solve the story, but it's like, what about the 15-year-old girl? What does she want, right? So in order to prevent that loophole from being utilized by perpetrators and the people that protect them, because we all know that perpetrators exist in our society because we protect them, right? We all have that uncle who touches people inappropriately, and everyone is just acting like, sasa tutafanya nini, because we do not center survivors, we do not think about the harm that is caused. We only think about protecting the perpetrator. And that's how the system ends up being exploited. This system of community justice ends up being exploited. So what I would say is we have to put at the forefront of our minds the interests of the survivor over anybody else.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And yes, we should actually think of the survivor, at the interest of anybody else. Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for that. We have noted that. We have put that into consideration. And hope everyone else is just listening and getting some of these insights also. So my next question goes to Kadil. So as our theme today focuses on strengthening capacities for gender-responsive legal systems and accountability for women and girls in Kenya. From Maria's work on the ground, so that is the organization that you have founded, what are the specific invincible barriers that prevent a young woman in Kenya, in a Kenyan informal settlement or rural area, from even considering the formal legal system as an option? You have seen and heard from Njahira some of the things that she encounters and her organization encounters. So can we just have a look at these things from Maria's eye?
Thank you so much. And yes, you are actually pronouncing it correctly. It's Femaria. So basically, from Femaria's lens, or rather the work we do on ground, we are based in Kenya. For those of you who don't know about Femaria, we are based in Kenya and we usually advocate for gender equity, social justice, and defending human rights. So apart from the work we do on ground, the biggest barriers are usually not legal in the sense in how we're talking about justice. It's usually psychological, it's usually social, and even structural. So basically, for a young woman in an informal settlement, or rather how we say it in a rural area, the legal system doesn't even feel like an option. Like many people are not opting for legal systems. People are not opting to go and look for further, justice. And this is basically the fear of stigma, because many of them are getting judged. They're getting victimized whenever they're going to report, or rather try and get justice from the police stations, the gender offices, or rather even the how can I say, the courts. So they're getting stigma, especially around cases of GBV, which is gender-based violence, and where reporting can be, how can I say, isolating. So most of the victims go isolated, or rather most of the survivors go isolated because of the different types of stigma they're facing. So then there's the issue of access. Like it can be there, but accessing it is the main issue. We have the legal processes from the police station to the hospital, getting the P3 to the courts. These processes are expensive, first of all. We have seen, like in Kenya, getting the P3 is almost 1,500, and not many people can be able to afford that 1,500. They are slow. We have seen cases taking years, and I mean years in the courts. Then they are also physically distant, because, as we have said, like in the rural areas, not many people can be able to reach these services. Not many people can be able to, go to the police station and report. They're not able to go to the court. So it's also a barrier for them. But then the invisible barrier in all of this is basically justice feels intimidating. That's basically the whole of it. Justice just feels intimidating.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And that even answers what Jahira was telling us earlier, that we should consider what the survivors over any other person. And now we see some of the things that are even preventing themselves. Some things like fear of stigma. Stigma is everywhere. And yes, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I would want us now to get to hear all this from Paris Mudivo. And my question to you is, as the founder of Tendet Foundation, hope that works now. It's better if my face is seen, sorry. So as the founder of an advocate, in many spaces, tradition is often cited as a barrier to gender equality. So how can we intentionally pivot traditional wisdom to serve as a protective mechanism for women's rights, and also ensuring it acts as a tool for justice rather than a justification or patriarchal norms?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. For those of you who don't know about Tenet Foundation, we work with communities, indigenous, traditional, local, to just empower their knowledge systems and also advocate for the inclusivity and decision making and sustainable solutions. So when it comes to the entire concept of gender, culture has like a duality. It's very complex. It can harm women, and at the same time, some aspects of it can protect women. And when we talk about culture, most of the mistakes that we keep on making is we either try to like take away the harmful concepts completely, um, or for some of us who are like so instilled in the culture, we take it as law. And I think we need to be as flexible with the fact that it has a dual nature. Most of the harmful, acts towards women, like the FGM, patriarchy, so many things that are happening to women, especially here in Africa, is backed up by culture. And unfortunately for us, I feel like we've never really accepted the fact that even before colonization, we already had patriarchy. We already diminished women's value to specific things that they can provide. For example, culture protected women, yes. We have very, very many laws cultural laws that protected women from violation, like sexual violation. And all this was tied to their purity, was tied to the fact that they're nurturers, which is something important and which is something we can also carry forward. But you see, the patriarchal point of view is for most cultures, if a woman was, found in unconsensual sex before marriage, she faced heavier punishment than, the guy. So we have so many aspects of culture that is very harmful that we can actually transform instead of trying to like write it out, tell people, no, you cannot do FGM. We need to like go deeper, have conversations with them. Why do you feel it is important for you guys to do FGM? Can we have another practice that carries much importance but does not devalue women? Can we have women taking part in decisions or taking part in the justice system, especially if they're being affected? We should have a different approach to how we deal with culture, because currently the way we're going, we are also contributing to cultural erosion. But also that doesn't mean that we should romanticize culture, just means that we should, have a different way of approaching it in general.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, it actually makes so much sense that we should actually have a deeper conversation with the people, because many a times we go say what we think, but in real sense, these people look at it from a very different perspective, which makes so much sense. So thank you so much for that. I would like to go back to Njahira and just talking specifically on digital justice and youth-led movements. So the Secretary General's report for the 70th Commission of the 70th session, of the Commission on the Status of Women emphasizes the need for human rights-based frameworks for digital justice. And drawing from your work with Akili Dada and the AU Youth Division, how are the young Kenyan feminists redefining legal advocacy in digital spaces, and what are the specific legal safeguards we need to protect these activists from technology-facilitated gender-based violence?
Yeah, thank you. I think if there's a group of people that have a really active presence online that leads to change, it's feminists, especially Kenyan feminists. If we think back to 2024, a lot of people think about the protests of June as having started, organically. But in reality, what had happened is that women were on the streets for the End Femicide movement from March. And the relentless fight because of the whole femicide sudden uprising, but the relentless movement of women on the ground, in the streets, and also online is what then pushed for that. Like the mood for protesting had already begun. So by the time we were getting the finance bill, the women had already led the charge in terms of how we would be engaging with oppression in the form of protest and online organizing. So we could even say that the online organizing of the finance bill got its blueprint from the feminists, right? So I think even though online space is quite a toxic space for women and feminists, if you think about the manosphere, the Andrew Kibes and all their disciples, and how they're relentlessly attacking us, and they're always coming up with strange new theories about, men maintain your frame, women are, I don't know, they're hypergamous or whatever else they say, and Andrew Kibe blaming the corporate feminists for all the problems that are plaguing Kenya. It always comes down to, it was a woman in leadership, and this is why the thing broke down. Or men can be in charge of all the genocides on earth, but let Samia Suluhu do one crime against humanity. Suddenly, this is why women cannot be presidents. We told you. So even though that is constantly happening, there's that constant barrage against feminists. It's also the place where we can gather together, not just to build a movement within Kenya, but to build a regional and an international movement, right? Before End Femicide, we had total shutdown, and we didn't get total shutdown from ourselves. Total shutdown began in South Africa. They were facing also issues of femicide. It then went to Namibia, Botswana, Zambia. By the time total shutdown became a thing in Kenya, we had been watching our feminist sisters in other parts of the continent doing their thing boldly and bravely, and realizing that we can do it too. right? So we are so good at leveraging that space. And even when we're unable to come together on the ground, like now when the government is limiting protests, is killing people for demanding for their rights, we still have the online space to rely on. Now, as you've mentioned, the key problem now, as we utilize this space for our advantage, to our advantage, is technology facilitated gender based violence. And I think a big part of this is due to negligence, not only on the part of the government, let's say, but the app developers themselves don't really care about women. I would say the apps themselves are misogynistic spaces. If you go to Twitter, that's the birth name, some people call it X, you will find that the misogyny is thriving because the owner of the app is a misogynist, right? And this is why a few weeks ago we saw men utilizing Grok to undress women. You know, at Grok, put this woman in a bikini, like you're living your life, you've just posted a nice selfie of yourself. The next thing you know, men are undressing you. And even when that was curbed, it was made so that only people who are paying for the app can undress you. You know, you can't undress me for free. You can undress me for $8 a month, you know. So the problem is on the part of the app developers. There are countries that take active steps. Like in certain countries, you'll not find certain apps. For instance, in India, there's no TikTok because who knows what they were using TikTok for, you know? China also has very strong regulations about which apps can be used and cannot be used. Australia recently passed a law saying nobody under the age of 16 can be on social media. So if more countries came together and put out these strict measures, then the apps would actually take us seriously and create safe spaces for us. But Kenya is almost a lost cause in this regard. We know that Kenyans are the ones who are utilized to train AI, which leads to post-traumatic stress disorder because you're basically spending the entire day flagging child pornography, for instance. And this week, we recently learned that it's also Kenyans who are training meta glasses, you know? And the government puts us in this position where they're like, but we're providing you with jobs. Okay, so you've been murdered in Saudi Arabia, but you are working, you know? You've died in the war in Ukraine, but you are working. So the fact that the government does not care leads these app developers to not care. So it's a trickle down problem.
It needs to start from the government. It should.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That just reminds us that it's there. The digital platform is there. We should actually make use of it. And also, as we make use of it, we should also at least try as much as we can, especially the government, to make sure that these spaces are properly used and they are safe for women. So that you're not undressed, it's actually very sad. Back to Kadil. On intersectional solidarity and marginalized youth. So your organization emphasizes intersectional solidarity. So when we talk about justice for all women, how do we ensure our advocacy doesn't leave behind queer youth, youth with disabilities, or those from marginalized pastoralist communities who face a double or triple burden of discrimination? Hi, Kadil. Are you still available?
Hi. Sorry, my net had discontinued me. So basically, when we're talking about justice for all women, we usually have to be intentional about who are we reaching and who is usually left out. Because we'll always say, oh, justice for women, but we're not looking at the women who are left out. So part of this group is the queer youth. We have young girls, or rather young women living with disabilities. We don't have to categorize them as a whole large group. We have to look at who is being left out. So as I've said, we have queer youth, we have the young women living with disabilities, and we also have those from the marginalized areas, or rather those in areas that are not accessible. In this case, I can talk about Kenya. We have the women from also the northern part. We have the women living in the streets. No one thinks about them. When we're talking about justice, no one thinks, oh, maybe they need sanitary towels. We'll just go and take them to, like, the areas that need them. That's okay, but we also have to figure out who is being left out and why are they being left out. And that's the whole reason about being marginalized. When we're talking about a marginalized group, it's basically understanding that this is a group of people who are not getting to fully enjoy their rights. And how can I say? So these communities experience layered discrimination. It doesn't have to be, oh, they're getting discriminated because of their color. They don't have to be discriminated. As we speak right now, you can be discriminated. First of all, let's say me, Kadil, I can be discriminated, first of all, because I'm a woman. Second of all, I can be discriminated because I am a Black woman in a South country, or rather just in a third world country. I can be discriminated because I'm a youth. So all of this are just facing layered discrimination. And it's not just as women, but through multiple identities. So when we're talking about justice for all women, we have to understand that if our advocacy only works for, how can I say, the most visible women, then it's not truly justice, but it's basically a selective inclusion. So just to put more emphasis on that, when I'm saying selective inclusion, we're basically just looking at we're picking this group. Yes, they might have been discriminated, but we are only focusing on this. And that's why I'm saying it's not justice if everyone, or rather if some people, or rather a certain group is being left out. So that's my point on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you said we're not supposed to only focus on the most visible, and we should also try to figure out who it is that we are reaching and who has been left out, so that we ensure that as we try to administer justice, we administer it to the people who actually deserve it. Thank you so much for that. I will now go back to Michelle. We still have some few minutes, so please. So we are looking on addressing structural barriers for specifically, now we go to the rural women. So rural and indigenous women often face a dual invisibility, and you had mentioned that earlier. So feeling alienated by the formal court system while simultaneously being marginalized within traditional ones. So, from your grassroots experience, what are the most persistent structural barriers they face, and how can we design a justice system that is truly accessible to them? And feel free to just not only just tie it to rural, you can be open and just talk about the different women and some of the things that you think are the barriers that are preventing the justice from being addressed.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like talk about the rural because this is something that's very intersecting. And I think in Africa, most of our decisions are somehow culturally influenced, even though we don't realize it or like admit it sometimes. When it comes to justice, I feel like we have patriarchal systems, or it is structured with a patriarchal kind of background, because it's at the end of the day it's going to be men making most of the decisions. At the end of the day, it is the man's word that holds more weight compared to the woman's, just like it used to happen back then, pre-colonial, post-colonial. It is always the women who are major backlash from every case or every issue. For example, let me even use a contemporary issue. I mean, we see these things happening all the time online. We see when maybe a man has assaulted a woman, and the cases all over the internet, and you see how people are discussing it. Even the women themselves usually have the worst things to say about these women. Or she should have covered herself better. She shouldn't have been with men past, during odd hours. The man is just a breadwinner. He has a wife. Why did this girl go for a man with a wife? There's usually so much blame that goes to women, and this is like beyond culture, beyond rural setups. It's a wide societal mentality that I feel needs to change. Ultimately, I feel like everything starts with us. It is up to us to think when we sit down with ourselves and we analyze things. Are we really in a our wavelength of thinking? Are we victim blaming? Are we women shaming? Are we really thinking of our own accord, or are we influenced by societal perspectives or cultural influences that we don't even realize we are, all in the name of Christianity or all in the name of purity or decency? These are cross-cutting factors that don't just affect um, rural women, it affects everyone in general. Now, the only difference between contemporary and rural women, let me use contemporary for lack of a better word, is that um, they mostly like justify their actions more culturally than modern people do. So you find sometimes they use cultural laws or cultural beliefs to analyze stuff than, like the modern, let me use modern people do. That's the only difference. But at the end of the day, these systems are still patriarchal, still oppressive, and all of it starts with us. All of it starts with each one of us, not just the men, even the women ourselves. We need to ask ourselves, do we have enough representation in justice systems? Will we support each other? Will we support ourselves when one of us, needs that support? Or will we also now start siding with society and shaming women as well? It's a bit sad, but yeah, that's how I think it needs to start with us as well.
Okay, so it needs to start with us. We're the ones to bring that change. That's what you're saying. Do we have enough representation? Are we? Yeah, so it's all about us. And thank you so much for that. And finally, as we just wrap it up, because we have like 4 minutes, back to you again, the last question. So when we are to understand how change happens, and there's a need for partnership that actually can be able to help us figure out the we in it. So how does integrating indigenous heritage with modern human rights frameworks create more sustainable and tangible social change for Kenyan women than top-down legal reforms alone?
Mm-hmm. So this is something that I'm actually like I feel greatly about. You find most of the time some decisions or most of the times laws are based on what the qualified, the educated people have to say about it, what they discuss in boardrooms and fancy setups. And they leave behind the actual lived experiences of the people that these laws will affect. We need to have multi-stakeholder engagement, and not just for the sake of having numbers or representation. We actually need to have interactions with the community. We need to have them feeling like, not really feeling like, but they need to have autonomy. They need to have a seat at the table where their inputs are actually reflected in anything that is discussed or anything that happens. So culturally speaking, as I said before, culture is very complex and it has like a duality. We still have cultural practices that are very supportive of, can really work well with our justice system. So we don't really need to just say it's just the law or nothing else. We can also acknowledge cultural laws, and we can also see how to transform harmful cultural laws to women respecting laws. There's so much we can do with the cultural background, but we actually need to engage meaningfully for us to get a solution.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And we have gotten that we need to engage meaningfully for us to get a solution. And also the fact that you also need to acknowledge these cultural laws because they are there and figure out a way of just engaging them. And finally, there's the need, you also mentioned the need for multi-stakeholder engagement, at least so that they have a seat on the table and be part of the decision making, not just the elite who are there and just thinking what they think is affecting them. Thank you so much. As we wrap up this, I would go to Cadil. So also on the part of accountability and the 2026 GBV targets, Kenya has an ambitious goal to end GBV by 2026. So as a youth-led organization, what is your report card on the government's progress so far, and how can we use digital advocacy to hold them accountable for the funding gaps in shelters and recovery centers?
Thank you so much, Irene. And just referencing back to your question, it's true, Kenya, we have a commitment to end gender-based violence by 2026. It's ambitious, as we all know. If you have seen it, you have all heard of it. So basically, but the reality on the ground is very different because it shows a gap between the commitment to actually doing it and the action. So basically, we have the plan, yes, but the things that we have no plan, basically, like there's no action going on. Like, yes, you might see small actions being done, but it's not enough compared to the commitment we have. So we still see underfunded shelters. We still have how can I say, limited recovery centers and even survivors centered. We have seen an organization like Usikimye even appealing for funds because, like, they're doing most of the work compared to what our actual system is doing. So basically, if I was to give a report card, I will say we have an increasement, if I might say, or rather we are doing better in terms of policy. I think on my first question, I even started by saying we do have the policies. I don't think there's a country in Africa that has a lot of policies like Kenya we have. We have a lot of policies, but then it's not enough in terms of resourcing, first of all, and accountability. So resourcing, it's, yes, we have human resource, we have people volunteering. Even at FEMASHA, we volunteer at, doing the work we do. But then there's also an very, how can I say, underfunded resources. We have no resources, we don't have materials, we're not able to do our work, there's no accountability happening. So if I was to say the young people to come out and hold the duty bearers accountable, and how we're going to hold the duty bearers accountable is also through social media, because social media is a very powerful tool. And when I say holding the duty bearers accountable, a duty bearer is basically anyone who is supposed to provide the service. So whether it's the people in the government, whether it's the people in the organizations, whether NGOs, whoever is in that capacity is a duty bearer. And you as the right holder, you have the opportunity, you have the right to hold them accountable. So I will say we have digital advocacy. We have the X platform. We usually see people doing X storms. We usually see people coming up with hashtags. We also have Instagram. People have Instagram lives. They have Instagram discussions. We have Facebook. We have very many platforms, in short. It's up to us to take the initiative to hold the duty bearers accountable in whatever position you are in as much as maybe you're not part of an organization, maybe you're not part of, a group, whatever, you're still in a position to hold the duty bearers accountable. And I can say we can use this same social media to track our policies. We have seen our policies being put online. We are able to call out, how can I say, funding gaps. Like during the 2024, while we were having the femicide, a rise in femicide cases, we saw the government saying they're giving out 100 million to, fast track or rather just deal with the femicide cases. But where did the money go? We have never seen an actual thing that's happening. So that is the thing that we need to do as young people. Thank you.
We need to hold the duty bearers accountable.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I hope the young people in here have heard that. It's up to us to hold the duty bearers accountable and just make sure that the recovery centers and what it is that they say they're going to do, that the funding and the resources that we need are actually available for use. So the last question to Jahira. As we close the CSW 70 today, the global community has produced a set of agreed conclusions based on your research into SGBV policy gaps. What is one international standard from this year's session that we must urgently prioritize in our action statement to ensure the Kenyan legal system becomes truly accessible to the most marginalized women by 2027?
I was reading the action points that they've put down, and I would say I would agree with Cadil. Like there's no other country in the world that has as many policies as Kenya has. So when you're reading the agreements of the CSW and they're talking about the need to ratify certain laws and to accede to them, Kenya is probably usually the first country to ratify every single law, well, with the exception of a few. So Kenya's problem, I don't think was properly covered by what the CSW is saying, like asking countries to please ratify laws or to ensure. I saw something else about like ensuring punishment, and we just had the technical group on femicide and GBV come up with similar recommendations, right? We saw the recommendations that they came up with. Kenya's problem is one of implementation. We've passed all the laws, we've written all the policies, everything is noted down to perfection. And even now, the technical group is asking for us to come up with definitions of femicide and so on. But even as we change the Sexual Offences Act or the Penal Code and we put in these definitions, is anything really going to happen in terms of implementation of the law? That's our main problem. How do we ensure? Another recommendation that the working group was giving was to ensure that cases are completed within 6 months. How do you even bring that into being, especially when the High Court is not properly resourced? You know, most times, I'm also a lawyer, most times you go to court just to ask for another date. You know, we're not ready, give us another date, and then you can do that for 6 years. So much corruption in the court system and the justice system. How can you guarantee that a case will be completed in 6 months? In fact, I can guarantee that a case will never be completed in 6 months, even though that's what the working group was asking for. So I would say what we need in order for the laws that we have ratified and the policies that we have passed to actually be used is better resourcing of the Ministry of Gender, of the judiciary, of the Attorney General's office. And we also need to actually take these things seriously. I think, and this would have to be norm change, behavior change. I think on paper we have these laws, but in reality, a lot of Kenyans don't really think that certain harms are so bad. You know, when we talk about violence against women, for some people it's men and women included. For some people it's, you know, your husband should beat you, or there's no such thing as marital rape, or for femicide, what were you doing with that man? Why were you there? You know, so people don't really take these things seriously. It almost feels as if like the law is just this thing on paper, and then there's the real life that we're living. So I would say we do need to prioritize not so much ratification, which we do so well, but actual implementation of the laws. And if I may, I've seen Mina has sent me some questions in the chat. If I can just address them quickly. I know we're over time by 7 minutes.
Yeah.
The first question was, is the femicide rate in Kenya on the rise or in decline? The femicide rate is on the rise. And the reason why we will not anytime soon see a decline in femicide is because femicide is an economic justice issue, in the sense that there is less money in men's pockets, right? And so there are higher stakes for how men approach spending money on women, and women not complying to whatever disgusting ideas they might have for them. You know, that's why we often see femicide in the cases of, I mean, I think our locus classicus is the case that Shafiwero talked about. This girl is on a rooftop, the man buys her drinks, and then she refuses to go home with him. What does he do? He throws her off the balcony. Or men who throw you out of an Uber because maybe you refuse to go with in an Airbnb, you're murdered. So it's usually things tied in with money because our pockets are getting tighter. But that does not mean that the more broke we become, the more violence there should be, because it is tied in together with the problem of the manosphere and the red pill movement and these ideas that men are being given about how, I don't know, men are the prize or I don't know what, and women just want to spend money. I mean, to use men's money, women are hypergamous, they're gold diggers. So all that messaging coupled with the economic crisis then leads men to commit the crimes that they commit. So if we don't address those two issues, if the economy is not bolstered, and even women are broke, right? So they're going to go for these men. The women are actually going to be like, yeah, nitumie fair and then anakula fair, because maybe she didn't have dinner in her house, you know. So we need to bolster the economy, and we also need to change how we discuss gender relations and how we view the different sexes. The second question was, is the Stockholm Syndrome prevalent in Kenya? And if so, how can justice be realized in such cases? I'm guessing that you meant not Stockholm Syndrome, because Stockholm Syndrome is when you're kidnapped, and then when it's time for release, you don't want to leave your kidnapper because you have gained compassionate feelings for them. I think you meant, what is this other term that people normally use? Trauma bonding, which is when you are a victim and you're bonded with your abuser, right? Kenyans use trauma bonding a bit differently, but that's what it means. These are psychological issues. I don't know if we can talk about justice, like justice in what sense? What would be needed is training the victim to unlearn the harmful habits that they are portraying, right? This is a psychological issue. Again, there's a stigma in Kenya with regard to like getting mental health services. I wish there was less stigma on that. I know that there are a lot of helplines these days that you can call actually. So this would be about going through the process of like psychological help, therapeutic help. Yeah, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And I guess Mina's questions have also been answered. So as we wrap this up, we can just have a final words from Jahira and Kadil, and yeah, let's start with Jahira because you're just from speaking, so I think you still have that energy. So we
Yeah,
can
no
just do
problem.
that. Yeah.
My final thoughts would be even with the outcome of CSW 70, the reason why we are at a 70th CSW is because things are not really improving, right? So when we think about CSW 70 and we think about the technical working group on GBV, I would encourage us as communities to really look outside the criminal justice system. When I started off, I talked about how it produces more harm than good. So I would encourage us to read more, learn more, and practice more anti-carceral forms of reparations. And we do this all the time with, with your neighbor, with, I don't know, your brother. Your brother hates you. You'll sit down with him. You won't call the police on him. So we need to encourage that sort of action with regard to the crimes that we see as being the most egregious, because at the end of the day, it's all about interpersonal relationships. So that's what I would encourage, addressing harm interpersonally using anti-carceral transformative methods.
Great, thank you. Kadil, your final thoughts on this?
Okay. I feel like we have talked a lot. We usually have a lot of talks, but I can say the real test of our system, and in this case, I'm talking like, justice systems and all that, whether it's religious, whether it's the courts, is will the system still work for the girl without an ID? For the girl, or rather the woman living in the, informal settlements, or rather the woman who's not seen by everybody. And I think I gave an example by even the women on the streets, the street families, the street women. Will the system still work for them? That is what we need to keep in our minds, even as we are advocating. And let's not be quiet. Basically, I talked about social media. Let's use our social media well, because that's the power. There is power in numbers, and we can be able to achieve whatever we want, regardless. And it's all just a matter of how we put ourselves out there, not just going out with no intention, like, just going out for the sake. Go out knowing what you want, how you want it, and where you want it. That's all.
Thank you. Go out knowing what you want and where you want it. Praise, we're back. Your final thoughts on this? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my final thoughts will just be like some sort of a parting shot, where we need to accept the fact that our cultures are not exactly perfect. They have complex dualities that we need to accept, but we don't need to try and change things or fix things. We just need to transform things into, a system that is better and more protective for women and for, everyone else, but for women. And yeah, I think that's something that we really need to.
Yeah, thank you so much for the amazing, amazing, amazing discussion. Thank you so much for the insights. Yes, Yuna is saying we should speak up. Our collective voices matter. Of course, yes, we should speak up. We should speak up. We should not be quiet. Exactly what Perry says. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I thought I was just here talking to myself. Thank you for that. So we should be able to speak up. Exactly what Perry said, and also Jahira told us that we need to encourage community to read more, learn more, and practice more. We should just not just be saying things that we do not even practice ourselves. And also, as we finish, yes, we should accept the cultures, that our cultures are not perfect, and also figure out a way of them being adjusted to fit in. So we are done with that. Thank you so much for your time, Jahira. Thank you so much for your time, Paris, and for the insights. And thank you so much for your time, Kadil. We will just go straight to the breakout rooms. They have been written on the chat. You can figure out the room you want to join, the discussions you want to be part of. We have breakout room 1 under the theme, the accountability gap, survivor-centered criminal justice, and GBV. So if you're interested, you can join that. There's a lot more to be discussed down there. And also we have room 2, the identity barrier, inclusive justice for marginalized and undocumented women. We have room 3, reclaiming knowledge, epistemic justice and alternative justice systems. And finally, room 4, the digital and bodily frontier. So yeah, just feel free to join any room you want to be part of conversation of. And yeah, we'll get back here later at 7. I've even taken up most of your time, so feel free to join anytime.
Yes, team. Are we not proceeding or the problem is with my device?
Hi, Eli. We are proceeding, and thank you. Hope you had amazing time in your different breakout rooms. So I know we were supposed to present something from some of the things that you guys have been able to talk about in your rooms. So cause you talked, I'm sorry, but now you are on the spot. So what are some of the things you talked about in your room, and what room were you in? Or do you have like somebody representing you guys in your room?
Okay, I'm Daisy, and because I believe in like 5 minutes, allow me to present on behalf of Brick Room 2, was it?
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So uh, the main topic was identity barriers, and the thing we discussed that must change at policy level is one, we decouple the rights from documentation in all subordinate legislation, and we amend the PADVA to include mandatory resource obligations alongside the legal orders. And then survivor outcomes units attached to every gender justice court. Uh, Allow me to just speak in layman's terms because I feel like I'm using a lot of abbreviations.
Okay. Go ahead.
I noticed when I started talking. I'm sorry for that. Okay. So, was it decoupling? Let me use decoupling because that is easier. So, the first policy we discussed was justice. Should the justice access should be decoupled from the national ID, where a woman's testimony should not be tied down to her legal identity. It can be looked into later on, but the moment she's coming to report, they should listen to it and treat it as somebody who's documented. And then we have the Protection Completion Act, because we discussed that who is exactly is a marginalized woman, and in as much as she had discussed it in the panel, we were looking at the street women and all that, and
Yeah.
then we were like, they should have a gender-based violence unit in across all ministries, because that is the one thing that we all agree in every ministry. We have divergent views, but that is the one part that we agree in. And then the presumption of citizenship, where the state must prove exclusion. The woman does not prove belonging. And I know I didn't say this when I was discussing in the room, but in the 2011 or 2010? I think the 2011 African Committee ruling on the Nubian community that Kenya has never fully implemented, where historically documented marginalized communities reversed the burden of proof, you know? They should actually consider that. And then the disability inclusive justice standards. So physical access, because we were talking about physical barriers, where the places, it's a very simple policy to implement. Just build a ramp or build something that somebody can access the place. Very simple, but it is not implemented. So we have like physical access, sign language interpreters. Even if you won't have them there full time, but have a contact, somebody you can call, as
Yeah.
essential personnel, credibility protection in prosecution guidelines, and caregiver. If the person is psychologically or has some disability that you can address as you're listening to the person, just have it there. And I think that is all. I would like to be excused. I need to leave if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think,
You are
sorry, if you have any questions, I think Kadel Gadoni is in a better position to help with that.
in the same group.
Kadel,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Daisy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's a representative from room 2. I think there was also room 4. Somebody from room 4?
Naongea kizungu ni wajinga bana.
Because, yeah, we do not want to continue keeping you here. So we want to make this real quick so that you can also go ahead and just continue with some of the things that you had planned on doing. So can we have a representative from one of the rooms? At least if you discuss something, let us know some of the policies you thought about and what it is that you discussed in your rooms. If you're here and you're in a room, Kadal, do you have something to add on behalf of Room 2?
Okay, so I feel like Daisy talked a lot about Room 2. So basically, our theme for Room 2 was the identity barrier. We had already covered it during the panel session, but from our side, it was mainly decoupling of documentation. You don't have to have that specific document for you to access justice. We also worked on the Kenya Human Rights Commission, which is KHRC. They usually deal with human rights a lot, but I don't think it goes extensively to these groups that people don't even see. I know we usually focus on the marginalized groups a lot, but there are those groups that people don't see, people don't, you don't think about them on a day-to-day basis. And there's also capacity building for the service providers, because we're not only dealing with, the magistrates, we're not only dealing with the gender officers, although they're still in need of a redo of, learning again, but you also need capacity buildings for, even the people working in the police station. How, just because you don't work in a gender desk, it doesn't mean that you have to be completely blank when a survivor comes to your desk. Even the people in the hospitals, how are you working? Whether it's your attitude, whether it's the skills or the knowledge, we need that capacity building. And also there's a way of assessing incompetencies. So I know we usually have social accountability tools. We've heard of them, measuring whether what you're giving out is what is needed. But we also need to find a way. Okay, we need to find a way of assessing whether our legal systems are indeed working. We can have a section just to know. It doesn't have to be particularly a questionnaire. We can go out, surveys, or even assess the gender responsive public services. Is this system working for you as an individual? I'm seeing a lot of people here. I can come to Kennedy, I can come to you, Irene, I can go to Ellie, Caroline, just anyone in the community, regardless of whether you have ever gone to assess this system. We ask you, is it working? Do you think it is working indeed? And then now we can go now to the service providers or even the duty bearers to find out, do you think you're doing a good work? Because genuinely, as a duty bearer, if I come and ask you, do you think you're doing a good work? And you tell me no, then what else are we doing? Then also there was one that was given by one of our team members, and it's to have mobile or rather community-based justice, because as we were talking about marginalized or rather the marginalized communities, most of them are marginalized geographically. They're not in a position to assess nimbali. By the time you think of going to the court, umechukua gari kama mbili, that is already too tiresome, and that's where most people stop. Unachia, just stopping to wanting to even get that justice. So it's mobile and community-based justice, and we also demand legal aid expansion in the community. The government can also bring in pro bono lawyers, pro bono service providers. I feel like group 2 we have presented a lot, so that is it from group 2.
Yeah, thank you. You definitely understood the assignment. Thank you so much, group 2. And Eli, you're back. Which group were you in, Eli? If there's no any other group presentation, then I think we'll just end it. I'll call Blessing to give us vote of thanks. Then yeah, if there's no
Yes, our group is right here, and sorry, I have technical problems. I was supposed to present on behalf of our group.
no worries, please go ahead. Which group is that?
That was the 5th group.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
So,
please, you can go ahead. Yes.
on the response to policy recommendations, we've come up with three policy proposals. And
Okay.
the first policy is
Mm-hmm.
aligning on the
Sorry, we've lost you, Eli.
on peace, advocacy, and meaningful engagement of women. There we meaningful engagements of women and proper coordination.
You're breaking. We are having trouble getting
We
you.
had
Sorry. Can you just start the point when you said alignment on something?
meaning. I said the meaningful engagements of women in negotiation tables.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh-huh.
So yeah, so it's aligning and negotiating with the State Department to come up with
Mm-hmm.
robust policy uh, coordinations at the last mile level to track positions of women.
Mm-hmm.
Then we also have the second recommendation. The second recommendation we were having meaningful engagements of rural women in climate resilience practices, and there we are recommending that we also align with the state departments on uh, uh, engagements of women in terms of policy recommendations on agroecology, because for example, in rural women, most of the youths are practicing farming. If you leverage on the kind of farming they do, it's more of
Mm-hmm.
not economic in place and the like of agroecology policy that will fast track and will engage women in more meaningful engagement when it's come to practices in farming. Then the third one, we have the engagements of women, especially that was a scenario that happened in the military barracks in Elderbook, the British military barrack that some women around there were raped and they find the foreigners go away with it. So those are things that the government, through proper coordination, can align and so that mental situations through consistent follow-ups and bringing to book and justice uh, serve in more resilience practice. So those are some of the three key proposals that we came up with as the fifth group. And I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is very well noted. Thank you so much for those insights. The recommendations are perfect. We have put them into consideration, and of course, we'll continue. Yeah, yeah, good job. We'll continue just having conversation around this so that we can see some of the things that we can do. Is there any other person that you're leaving out? If you're in any room that has not presented and you feel like you want to present some of the things you presented in your room, you can, yes, the floor is yours. You can just raise your hand or just interrupt. Feel free to interrupt and just present, because if there's none, then we will be closing in a few. So maybe just a few seconds in case there's anybody we are leaving out. Cool. Okay. If there's none, then I'll hand it over to Blessing to just give us a vote of thanks. Then we close it.
Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes, you're audible. Good evening.
As we bring this conversation to a close, I not only want to thank the speakers, but everyone else who attended. These insights have been nothing short of transformative. So today we confronted uncomfortable truths. Thank you to everyone for highlighting the glaring gap between Kenya's progressive policies, like our commitment to end gender-based violence by 2026, and the reality on the ground, which is that we are very quick to ratify laws, but without proper resources and tangible action plans, policy means very little. So we hope this will encourage everyone to move past lip service and hold UTBRs accountable for actual implementation. In addition to that, thank you for bringing the focus to like intersectionality and layer discrimination. We've all been reminded about selective inclusion, and now we know that that is not justice. And we know now that we cannot only focus on the most visible problems, we need to dismantle the structural and patriarchal barriers that leave out the rural and indigenous and multiply marginalized women. And then now, when we talk about the discussions in the breakout rooms, I commend everyone for tackling the modern and systemic threats to women's safety and women's health. Um, we talked about like the harmful rhetoric of the red pill movement and the alarming rate in femicide, which we've been showed is deeply tied to like economic justice and entitlement. And these are the realities that we are up against. So we're hoping that hopefully everyone is gonna learn how to break the cycles and unlearn harmful habits. And as we mark the close of the CSW 70, hope that this webinar has made even at least one thing clear to everyone, that grassroots women organizations are like the true drivers of transformative justice reform. So thank you to organizers, thank you to our brilliant speakers, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. Let's leave here committed to demanding accountability and doing the real work to invest in women. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for coming, for joining us. Thank you for our beautiful panelists. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Just have yourselves a lovely evening ahead. Feel free to leave.